Hey guys, it's Eínon once again. Welcome back to episode 1.5 of the Falklands Malvinas War. I decided to make this video to talk about some of the weapons used during the conflict. I could talk about them here in Portugal, but instead I know a better place in England. I'm now at the south of England, at Portsmouth, at the Explosion, which is the naval museum dedicated to the weapons of the British Navy. And we are going inside to see some of the guns and weapons that they have during the Falklands War. They have here a very impressive display showing all the missiles used by England during the Falklands War. The first missile is Seacat, which entered service in 1962. It was a small British-designed, short-range, surface-to-air missile, which was mainly guided by radio to the target. Subsonic, it was widely sold abroad to friendly nations, namely Argentina. However, by 1982, it was almost obsolete, and the Argentinians knew that. If a plane flew extremely fast and at low altitude, it was almost impossible to hit it. This is similar to the missile launcher that was used on the British warships, as well as the Argentinian cruiser General Belgrano. And we can see that it's quite portable compared to the other missiles, and it houses 4 missiles on the rocket launcher. Smaller, the Seacat, which was used by both the Argentinian and the British Royal Navy during the war. And it was a point defense missile only used for short defenses. Since it was a subsonic missile, it wasn't exactly accurate, so it seems that from the 100 missiles that were fired in the war, only 1 plane was shot down. This massive missile here is the Seaslug, the main weapon of the HMS County class destroyers that also fought during the war. Seaslug used a beam guiding system, which means that the radar of the ship was used to guide the missile to the target. Although highly advanced when it was fielded on 1961, it was totally obsolete by the time of the Falklands War. One was fired against an aircraft during the war, and it failed to hit it. Still, the British had far more success using it as a shore bombardment missile, being used to destroy an enemy radar and to cover the island runway with debris to prevent Argentinians C-130 to land there. What's really interesting about this missile is that its name, it's called Seaslug. I mean, the British could have called it a rocket or comet or lightning or something like that, but they call it Seaslug. Doesn't really make much sense for their main missile. Sea Dart was a highly advanced missile which was installed on the Type 42 and 82 destroyers, as well as the Invincible aircraft carrier. Sea Dart was designed to destroy high-altitude Soviet bombers equipped with anti-ship missiles, and was overall a formidable missile. However, I keep using this word, the missile had a tendency to fail against planes flying at low altitude, and since Argentina also had 2 Type 42 class destroyers, they knew its limitations and they used tactics to evade it. Because of this, almost all aerial attacks made by Argentina were done at extremely low level, which also reduced their range, payload and speed. Sea Dart shot down 7 planes during the war, not counting a British helicopter that they shot down by mistake. In here we have a Sea Dart missile launcher. It's a massive launcher that is designed to carry and launch the Sea Dart missile. And the missiles are fed from these 2 containers here on the sides, and they are then loaded on the rails and then pointed to the target and fired. And in here we have a Seawolf, which was the short-range surface-to-air missile used by the Type 22 class frigates. In here we have a Seawolf missile launcher, and we can see here how the missile worked. It was a launcher designed to fire 6 missiles, and they needed to be loaded, each one by hand, once they were fired. The problem with this missile was the difficulty with locking on the targets. But only about 5 planes were shot down, and because of the many issues with the missile, HMS Coventry was sunk The Sidewinder was an American-designed air-to-air missile. Supplied in secret, they were installed on the Sea Harriers. The Sidewinder had an infrared guidance system, which means that the missile followed the hot gases coming from the engine nozzle of the planes. Previously, the launching plane needed to be behind the target to launch the missile, but the L version of this missile was new, since it could hit enemy planes head-on. For the Argentinian pilots, this was a very nasty surprise. In here we have one of the Sidewinder missiles that were used by the British Air Force and the Royal Navy, Fleet Air Arm, to destroy many of the Argentinian planes in the Falklands. Rapier was a small land-based SAM. It was deployed by the British at St. Carlos, but because it used vacuum tube technology, it was highly sensible and many failed to launch. Exocet was a French-designed sea-skimming anti-ship missile that achieved considerable success during the war. Two versions were used. The ship-launched version was used by both nations, however, none was fired from a ship during the war. And the air-launched version, used by Argentina. Only 5 missiles were delivered to Argentina before the war, because England blocked further sales. Okay, in here we have the Exocet anti-ship missile. This was the most famous missile used during the Falklands War, because it was used to sink the HMS Sheffield destroyer and the Atlantic Conveyor cargo ship. It was launched by the Superétendard anti-ship attack plane, and it was also used on a shore-based land battery that was used to hit the HMS Glamorgan at the end of the war. In here we have a 4.5 automatic main gun used by most of the most modern British warships during the Falklands War. This gun fired a theoretical rate of fire of 25 rounds per minute, and the shell cases were expelled from this hole here, and they didn't have anyone on board, so they are fully automatic, and much was expected of this gun. However, it wasn't exactly reliable, and many of the guns had continuous problems with their rate of fire. In here we have a 114mm or 4.5 inches surface gun. It was mounted on the County-class destroyers used by the British during the war. It seems that it was a very reliable gun. It was quite accurate, and although it was hand-fed, it was still quite effective compared to some of the most modern weapons. Next is another well-known weapon from the Second World War, the Swedish 40mm BOFORS. It was a powerful autocannon that could fire 120 rounds per minute, using 4-round clips that were loaded from the rear of the gun. As long as you could keep feeding it, the gun would fire non-stop. During the war, some British ships, namely the 2 Type 22 frigates deployed for the war, used this weapon. Behind me we have an OERLIKon 20mm autocannon, and it was the main light weapon used on the British warships and American warships during the Second World War. The gun was still used during the Falklands War on almost all warships used by the British as a last resort weapon, in case the missiles failed to fire or failed to hit the planes. In here we have an FNL assault rifle and a Sterling submachine gun. What's interesting about these guns is that they were both used by Argentina and the UK during the Falklands War. The guns were the same, and it's really interesting to see that the special forces from both sides use the same gun, and the army units, most of them use the same assault rifle during the war.